Hello again, everybody. I've been watching videos by both David Icke and Russell Brand, where initially David Icke had a go at Russell Brand, uh, and there's nothing wrong with that. I've done it myself. And Russell Brand responded, and I got thinking about it. It's what we're seeing is what we. It's like what we're seeing is David Icke, who's completely Gnostic now. That's Gnosticism, 100%. And Russell Brand, who's this born again Christian stuff. Both kind of putting their philosophies out there. And as a pagan, I would like to throw a third piece into the mix because no one ever listens to us. So, so David Icke was saying, it wasn't incorrect what he was stating. It was true, but it was terribly defeatist and negative. And this is why the pagan writers laughed at the Gnostics. They basically considered Gnosticism a suicide, cult. It offers people nothing but suicide because everything is utterly hopeless. And that's exactly what Gnosticism is. Now, David Icke was saying things like, which is, evidently true, that if you look at the natural world, everything is tearing itself to bits for survival. And that's true, we know that. That's how natural law works. So the Gnostic attitude was this is a horrible planet, it's a prison, and it has no redeeming qualities as is perceived. Is perceived because the archons, the lords, have created this reality, this Gnostic prison planet. And the only way to get out is to basically change the program. And in the case of Gnosticism, it was to break the cycle of reincarnation. But they never really said anything of how you could really do that. And and the other side, Christianity, and we saw this both played out by both David Icke and Russell Brand, was that Christianity offers salvation through Jesus Christ, basically forgiving you of original sin that Eve foisted upon you, and you would get into heaven and have everlasting life in this sort of like Jewish country club in the clouds, and all your friends and your family would be there. Okay. Now, so there's an infantilism to Christianity that sort of like says, all you have to do is say a few prayers, repent, and believe, have faith, and everything will be fine in the end, regardless of what happens here on this planet. And I know that's a simplistic version of it, but ultimately that's what it is. Now, Gnosticism is it's hopeless. It's just hopeless. And that's the end of it. So the 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 pagan point of view is that yes, the natural world is carnage, that life is generally difficult to survive, but there is meaning in all this, and there's transcendence in all this via not praying and hoping that like the stories that are in the synoptic gospels are true and you'll actually get past St. Peter one day, and that's fate. Or you can break the cycle of reincarnation and just become some kind of like spiritual entity away from all this suffering. And I have to say, I've sympathy for both sides. I'm not just saying I understand where it comes from. But the pagan point of view is we are here and this is what we have. This is it, right? And generally pagans believe in reincarnation. And the purpose of reincarnation is to keep this world going and keep it safe. So you're coming back. So instead of like dreaming about going to like the Jewish country club in the sky, or space Israel on Mars, you look after this planet and this world, and you try to improve it. So when you come back, it's a little bit better than when you left it in your previous life. Now, if you think of the consecutive form of reincarnation, which is not the only type, there's consecutive forms of reincarnation where you come back like literally a few months after you died and you start again in, following the timeline. And then there's literally sort of like living it again reincarnation where you come back and live your own life. And some sects of Orthodox Judaism really do believe that. Either way, I'd rather do that with all the difficulty in this world than to be kind of just become a kind of um, a spiritual energy or and nothing else, or go live in a Jewish country club in the clouds. I hope if it's true, if you think that's coming for you. Now, when you have a pagan attitude towards it, you don't sit there going, "Oh, it's all hopeless. It's all a big killing field. It's a horrible matrix. We're run by a demonic demiurge force that controls us." And you don't and you don't say the Christian thing like, "Oh well, if it's shit now, when we go to heaven, everything will be fine." Both systems are forms of control when you think about it. Pagans, on the other hand, would try to make things better. So, for instance, if let's look at pagan Rome, right? Let's look at pagan Rome. Pagan Rome, everyone gets dysentery from large numbers of people living in towns and cities, and they're getting dysentery from poor water supplies. The wells are dirtied and all this stuff. The Gnostic version of it is, "Oh, that's shit. That's how it's always going to be. Don't just hope that you break the cycle of reincarnation." The Christian is like, "Well, we're all suffering here, but don't worry about it. When we die, you'll get into that Jewish country club in the clouds, and everything will be great." Pagans would go, "Why don't we build an aqueduct? Why don't we build an aqueduct that takes water from a lake or a river and carries it across the Italian countryside," well, it would have been Roman countryside then, "and deliver it into drinking fountains in Rome. So all the citizens of Rome and all the slaves and everyone there will have access to fresh drinking water and not have to worry about cholera and dysentery." So you say it's a big job, it's a huge project. And then the pagan goes, "Yeah, because it's worth it." And so skills are developed. They start building smaller viaducts and they learn things. They learn about masonry. They learn about, hydraulics. They learn about using sumps and everything else to move water using specific levels of gravitational inclines. And next thing you know, they're building colossal viaducts, literally bringing in millions of liters of water into the city every day, potentially. It was huge work. It took time. So the pagan mind looked at the law. They didn't conquer nature. They worked with nature. By what did they do? The fresh drinking water from the streams or the lakes didn't flow into Rome, so they built an artificial river using natural law, gravitational flow, and suddenly it was a lot better in Rome. That's how pagans do things. Okay, we don't say, "Oh, woe is all shit. Let's hope we break reincarnation." And they don't say Jesus will fix it. They fix it. They fix it. And this is the pagan mindset. The pagan mindset. Why? Because you will come back. You'll probably come back if you believe in reincarnation, like Northern Europeans do. I think you basically get what you want. So no one's completely wrong, but you want to. Excuse me. But if you're coming back, you want to have a better place that doesn't have dysentery and cholera. The same with everything else. The same with everything else. And so it's and then you would say, well, that's like a mechanistic, materialistic way of dealing with it. No, they would have had they would have had the feelings of deep religious conviction when they were doing these things, deep spiritual conviction, and they would have talked about the gods, and they would have made sacrifices at the temple, and they would have had, Jove, Jupiter, Zeus, whatever, help us build this thing. They would invoke things like the stories of Hercules, how do we get through that mountain? Well, Hercules could do it. See why paganism is really good? Because it takes these natural forces and it anamorphizes or zoomorphizes them into something beyond your mortal life on this earth. And this has even happened in things like Christianity, by default, not on purpose, but they were. Let's talk about the Gates of Vienna, where two versions of third-party Judaism were slaughtering each other for control of Europe, Islam and Christianity. Who rode in and saved the day? The Polish winged hussars. Yes, they were Roman Catholics, but they came in at the day. What were they dressed like? Zoomorphic designs, because putting on those wings things, they were not suddenly just cavalry charging at the Turks. They were almost shamanic, zoomorphic, transcendent warriors. And the Turks would have fainted seeing that because of the prohibitions on things like art and stuff like that in Islam. And so, although they were Christian, the brave and amazing Polish winged hussars were Roman Catholics, that was a very, very pagan thing to do, to cover yourselves in feathers and to look like almost like a being of like a god or something like that, a very shamanic. So you see that would have been, that's the kind of mentality that came from the pagan world. And it remained true, probably through Slavic paganism, and eventually in some kind of archetypal form entered into the winged hussars in the Polish cavalry. The other thing he was saying was like that, David Icke was, he was saying that we're living in a programming, and that's been proven by quantum theory, that we are living in a kind of a collective dream. And then he says you get something from source, and that source is beyond when you get a spirit, when you get a download or whatever he was saying, that is beyond the prison planet, beyond the Demiurge's trap. Well, how do you know that that's not the second layer of it? It's like being like a Russian nested doll. The first one is this material nature we live in, and the second one is like another one. That could be that could be part of the programming too. You don't know for sure. But what you do know is that while you're living in this reality, you can make things better for yourself. Also, regarding the whole thing of suffering, what does suffering generate? Meaning. Okay, if you survive it, you're eternally grateful. You have a motorcycle accident and your legs are destroyed, and then you're in hospital for months and you're shitting in a bag. And with the physiotherapy and the doctors, again, that would have came. Where did all the science? Where did all that come from? Ancient classical pagan world. You're walking again. You're walking again, and you're grateful, and you suddenly say, "Isn't the human legs the most remarkable thing? It sustained me all this time until I had the motorcycle accident, and here it is again. I will never take these incredible locomotory organs for granted ever again." That's meaning. That's appreciation. Okay, that's meaning. Also, it creates art. It creates philosophy. It creates poetry. It creates theater. It creates pathos. It creates transformative aspects of culture that suddenly, you're a black slave in South of America, and you're picking cotton or whatever, but then you down the road you're playing blues music, and you're giving the world the gift of this beautiful music. Now you say, well, that's no good to the guy picking cotton in the field. Well, that's why human beings have always thrived when they had children, to hope that their next generation would be better off. And even if they don't, if I come back as a reincarnated soul, I want it to be better. I don't want to be a slave. I want to be something better. So this, like for instance, what David Icke was saying really, say, look, we like miners. You know, let's look at the trade union movement. What used to be a good thing, right? So you're working in a Lancashire mill, or you're down a coal mine in Wales, and it's absolute shit, right? And it's dangerous. Now, if they were all Gnostics, they'd go, well, let's hope we escape the cycle of reincarnation and never have to deal with this. Or if they were Christians, we'll say prayers to Jesus, and hopefully St. Peter's will let us into the Jewish country club in the clouds. Or let's form a trade union and go on strike for better pay, working conditions. And it works. Why? Because we're not slaves anymore in jobs. You know, my great grandfather worked at the Jameson's distillery in Dublin, okay, for 50 years. What was his job? He was like an animal. Because he was a Catholic, he couldn't get a good job there. So he literally had a plow on his back, and he used to walk up and down these enormous stone barns, back and forth 8 hours a day, turning over the grain to stop it from going moldy, you know, from making the whiskey. His son, my great grandfather, was 35 years there until he was loading something onto a truck and it chopped one of his fingers off. And they gave him a few small quid compensation and he was out. That was two, father and son gave Jameson's distilleries 80, what was it, 35 and 50, 85 years of like animalistic service, right? Me, the grandson and great grandson, has seen the world. So has my father, who came from that as well. He's been all over the world because things were improving, things were getting better, things were because instead of saying, you know, let's suffer, people said, let's do things. And this is why ancestral worship is so central to paganism. Is because we remember the hardship our ancestors went through and brought us to this point where our lives are better, because they knew that they would come back. They wouldn't just like dissipate, or they wouldn't just be go to try and, you know, bribe their way in, moralistically bribe their way into the front door of a Jewish country club in the clouds, where by much, you know, now even Christianity, you know, if the synoptic gospels are true and not just made up, there is even a passage in there where Jesus Christ says, render unto God what is God's and render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. One of the actual better quotes in Christianity, meaning you have your spiritual life and you have your flesh and blood daily life, you know, and you still have to do both. You still have to go through the process, you know, you deal with it. So I think David Icke started, you know, okay, I don't care where Russell Brand's spiritual beliefs are. If he's a Christian now and he got that baptism in the Thames was genuine and legit, that's his own business. Good for him. If it's, you know, I don't know how literal it is, but hey, that's where he is now. And David Icke was showing pictures of him on P. Diddy's private airplane, but it was very unfair because those photographs were taken before he had his baptism. I'm pretty sure. Maybe wrong, right? Maybe correct me. So it was a bit wrong doing that, right? Russell Brand said he really liked David Icke, and he said David Icke's been proven correct over the years. But Russell Brand, being who he is, he waffles, and I could only take him in very limited doses. Now, the other thing was that Icke was talking about MAGA and AI and Elon Musk and Trump, and it's all part of the same control thing. So basically, David Icke's thing is there's no hope. No. Like you can say, like we could have all this thing of breaking through the matrix and stuff. You know, and that we'll build a new matrix. Yeah, we were doing that, but we're doing it on this planet. You know, this is why the one of the most central, as well as, and that changed the consciousness. It's see, pagans do magic, right? And what we know magic is a specific art and sciences to create change in the material world. And this is why things like smiths and smithing is such a powerful thing within paganism. Who made the horseshoes for Odin's horse Sleipnir with his 8 legs? Who made those 8? This was given to me by a chap called Mold in England, very nice lad. Um, this this where did those 8 horseshoes came from? The farrier, the smith. So this is he made tools to make life easier. You know, he made plowshares so they could actually grow food. You see, and that becomes part of a legend. So, you know, in Ireland you have the Gobanu or the Gobansea and the Smith god. You have paganism everywhere. You have the Smithy god. You know, because it's magic. It's magic. You're taking. This is why the Abrahamic religions have a prohibition on magic. It's because magic actually changes things for the better without the need for Jehovah, the Demiurge, you know, and all that stuff. You can do it here. You know, you can take your art, your thoughts, and your talent, and you can take your science, let iron ore, whatever it is, copper, smelt it down and make tools to actually make your procuring of food easier for your kids and you when you come back. And that's why that's so central to paganism. So that's automatically discounts the thing. Oh, it's all rubbish. It's all horrible. We're all suffering. And I don't trust this whole thing, like you're saying that, like, well, you're getting it from source. It's the real download. No, that could be part. That could easily be part of the second level of control. But guess what? It's not a level of control. It's not. You know the yeah okay. The Gnostics called them archons, right? As these sort of like, well, when you look at the archon thing, it kind of has two meanings. One is like the bureaucrats of the Roman Empire, you know, or of the Christian world pecking on them, or it's these, you know, psychopathic sort of like non-material entities, which is probably a lot of truth to that because we do know that doesn't kind of exist. But the battle with them is is a battle we have to fight. It's just like, and when we triumph, when we come out through bad times, we're like the birds who are singing in the springtime. Now, we're coming up to Samhain. What Samhain really meant to our ancient ancestors, and there's Samhain type things all over, was because you might not make it through next winter. We might not have enough food, and if it's a really bad winter this year, we're not going to make it. So on Samhain, we will have one final hurrah, and we will talk about, you know, the other world and our lost loved ones and this kind of thing, and we'll have one party and hope we have enough, you know, stored up hazelnuts and other things, salted pork and salted fish, to get us through to April and stuff like that until we can, you know, uh, that's where that came from. It was the final party, and you had to confront your own mortality because, you know, back then, if you there was a good chance you wouldn't make it through the winter, you know. But human beings, well, being what they are, they would build structures to protect them from the cold. They would live in long houses. Look at the Inuit and the igloos, for Christ's sake. That's incredible, you know, genius. And so, you know, you were like Dylan Thomas. You raged against the dying of the light. You raged against. You didn't give in and say, "Oh, it's all crap" or anything like that. So I'm not putting down David Icke or Russell Brand particularly regarding this whole thing, the schism that they have going on. But what I'm trying to say to people is there is alternatives like paganism, that means you don't have to be either Abrahamic or Gnostic, and you can find meaning to suffering, particularly the transformative elements of overcoming suffering. And it's also a generative force, and especially if you use it in terms of natural law, i.e., the Roman viaducts. And there's loads of examples of that. So, and pagans did have their own kind of, idealism thing as well, like, Arcadia and all that, as but they were, these were not, and they reserved parts of the countryside for gods, groves and things like that, where only humans could, Diana lived there and stuff like that, and a great reverence for nature. And I think they gave people a very good way to live. And this is why the Abrahamics, when the Roman Empire took, used it to basically control their people, they turned the great god Pan into the archetypal devil. And but what did that? You could say, you hear these stories like, oh, the ark, maybe it was outside, right? But there would have been pagans who said, that's a load of rubbish, I'm not doing that. I'm pretty happy as I am. And and they would have went on, they would have went on and survived and whatever. So you don't have this whole thing of like this fatalism, that this endemic fatalism is not good for people's emotional and spiritual and mental health, because it creates a negativity, and then they say, well, break from the matrix. But David Icke and his son are both on YouTube and, Google, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying good luck to them. I think they do, and overall, they do a really good thing. I mean, Garrett Icke it seems like a very decent guy. And his dad, well, he has woken so many people up. I'm never going to never take that from him. But there, don't, you're, well, that's an example of having to use what this matrix gives you in order to get a different message out. So instead of people watching David Icke's videos and going, "Oh, we're living in a prison matrix and we have to break from it," what about saying, "Well, isn't it a good thing that we have YouTube or printing presses and all these other things and radio broadcasts, that we can actually get our hands on this information? We can actually get our hands on this information. Isn't that a good thing? Isn't that like saying, well, isn't it a double-edged sword? Sure, it's bad. It's good as well. It's good as well." So that's just the pagan point of view. I'm not attacking either man directly. It's just because no one ever listens to people like us. I mean, we pagans were just screaming in the wilderness, and and everyone hates us, and there's a new war against us by American Christians, and you only every 5 minutes Tucker Carlson, who I don't particularly have a problem with, pagans this, demons that, pagans pagan, all gods, and then there's all these other Abrahamic saying the same, so we're well, nobody likes us, but we don't care.